Hypnosis and influence. Hypnosis is everywhere, or is there no such thing as hypnosis? That's what we want to talk to you about on this video. I think you're going to like this.
That is indeed the question. Does hypnosis exist? Is everything hypnosis or is nothing hypnosis?
And this is Mike Mandel. I'm Chris Thompson. We run MikeMandelHypnosis.com. Let's introduce why we're making this video. I was doing an exercise workout the other day and I heard the trainer say, I'm just offering you suggestions. You make the decisions. And I realized that's very similar to what we already say to people in hypnosis. A hypnotist will offer suggestions, and the client has to, of course, decide whether or not to accept those based on certain criteria.
It might even be that the hypnotist is offering direction, like sit down, separate your hands, take a deep breath. They're not suggesting these things, but giving directions to the subject. But the subject is still free to determine that they're going to accept these or ignore them completely.
And of course, the same thing happens in everyday life. Somebody might make a suggestion to somebody else, like, let's go out to dinner at this particular restaurant.
And the person may go, yes, or
no. And so what is the difference really that makes the difference between a suggestion that is accepted, and we're talking here right now in everyday life, influence or hypnosis it could be, but we'll get into hypnosis in a moment. What makes the difference between a suggestion that is accepted and acted upon versus
one that is completely ignored?
Right. So what affects your decision making? Well, let's go through a list. Let's start with
your own best interest.
Right.
If something is good for you or is something that interests you, someone invites you to go to a basketball game or something, or they offer you $10,000, you're going to make this internal check and go, this is in my best interest. I'm going to accept this suggestion.
Not a whole lot of influence required in that situation. And that's a universal that obviously exists, and that's going to happen no matter what, whether it's hypnosis or everyday influence. The next one is what we're going to call Cialdini's principles of influence. We will spend more time talking about that in a moment, and those are clearly going to map across into the field of hypnosis.
And the third one is threatening someone or using some form of coercion. And although this will work short term, this kills trust and rapport with people. So we're not recommending that.
Exactly. Threats and coercion, we call that the trust killer. So all right, let's have some fun here. Let's start by breaking down the 6 principles of influence that Robert Cialdini talks about in his amazing book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. So
this is a great book. And the very first one of his principles is liking. Now, do you know that if someone likes you, they're much more liable to accept suggestion or direction from you purely based on liking you? In fact, studies have shown one of the strongest things as to whether or not therapy works is whether the subject likes the therapist.
So it stands to reason that if you like somebody, you're more likely to be influenced them. We will, of course, we'll be mapping these into hypnosis in a moment. The next one is scarcity. So let's say you go out shopping and you're outside of the store and there's the window and it says 50% off until Saturday only. That's scarcity. That's something that's on sale. It's time limited. You're more likely to be influenced when there's a time limit. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's just one of the principles of influence.
Right. And if you think that you're not going to be able to get something, there isn't enough of something, naturally it makes you want it more. And this is done all the time.
In fact, we're going to be pulling down this video in about 5 minutes, so make sure you keep, we're just kidding, scare you?
Clever. I like that.
So let's move on to the next one, reciprocity.
Reciprocity is really interesting. It's the idea that if I do something for you, even something small, like handing you a can of pop, there's a very strong feeling on your part that you have to now do something back for me as well. This is built into human nature.
Yeah, it's the give and take, right? If you get something from somebody, you feel compelled to give. If you get a Christmas card one year, you're more likely to send a Christmas card back to that person who sent one year. So there's that. The next one we're going to talk about is social proof. So the idea that if I'm doing something and a bunch of other people are doing something, you're more likely to do that something too. What else do we call that?
Right, like we say in terms of, put this fertilizer on your lawn. All your neighbors have done it. All my neighbors have done it. I better get on the bandwagon and do it. And the other name for social proof is bandwagon.
Bandwagon, right. And the next one is the rule of authority. So if somebody is seen as an authority, a policeman, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever it is, if they give you some advice, funny enough, even if they're not an authority in the area that they're giving you the advice, you're much more likely to listen to that person.
Right. People asking their medical doctor for financial advice, which is kind of strange. I used to put a stethoscope on during a keynote as a joke to increase my credibility and make people listen.
And you draw attention to it, right?
Pretty much,
now,
yes.
to increase my credibility,
Yes.
I'm going to put on this stethoscope. So that works. And then finally, we've got the principle of commitment and consistency. And that's a big one. And this is the general idea that if you make a public commitment, the more public, the better. The louder, the more public, the more repeated that your commitment is, the more likely you are to
gonna keep on with it. Yeah.
right, remain consistent with that declaration.
Now,
Right?
the question is, out of all of these, which of them apply to hypnosis for therapy?
That's it. So that's the question. This is where we get into that magic of, well, there's no such thing as hypnosis, but everything is hypnosis.
Right,
isn't it?
right.
All right, so let's talk about liking. We talked about Cialdini's principle of liking. What do we call that in hypnosis or NLP?
Create rapport with someone. We create a loop of rapport where they're in a psychodynamic loop. We model what they're saying. We offer back their language. All of these things, which increases the sense of connection.
Right.
And then it builds rapport.
So a hypnotist is using this in the interview process, and then during the change work process, we're often reflecting back their own words.
What about authority with hypnosis?
That's a great question. So in the principle of authority, we've got, the police officer or the lawyer, as we alluded to a moment ago. Well, we call that in the world of hypnosis prestige.
Yes.
If you are the hypnotist, then you're much more likely to be presented to someone as an important person who can help another person change. Or in the case of a stage hypnosis show, you're the hypnotist.
Right.
And the audience is the volunteers, I should say, are much more likely to react.
Right,
So-
and this goes back to Edward the Confessor about 1,000 years ago. He had incredible prestige and could heal people with something called the royal touch. And the term the hypnotist, we got it from our friend Anthony Jacquin.
That's it. And of course, the prestige also falls back to Mesmer and the iron rods and
Yes.
all that stuff. So even though that wasn't hypnosis, formal hypnosis, it still
worked
had
anyway,
the same
yeah.
result.
So what about commitment and consistency with hypnosis?
Well, that is a really important principle of influence in Cialdini's work. And guess what? In hypnosis, we call that heteroaction, which comes from Andre Weitzenhofer, right?
Yes.
Way back in the day. I don't remember what year it was.
1957.
There you go. So do you want to explain quickly? And we have a video on heteroaction, so we can put up a little YouTube card to link to it if you want to visit that. Explain it.
Yeah, the whole principle of yes sets and compliance sets, the idea is someone starts agreeing with you, starts complying, heteroaction kicks in, meaning they are now more likely to do something else for you, even if it is completely unrelated to the earlier things.
So while yes sets and compliance sets are often used in a sales environment, hypnotists will use a yes set and a compliance set to guide a client towards accepting the process that's happening, to participate very actively in the session, and much more likely, as a result, to get a result for the client.
Yes, and suggestibility tests are a perfect example of this.
That's it for the Cialdini principles and how they map across into hypnosis. But let's just really go back to the three that we gave you earlier. Best interests, that was the top of the list. So how do we use someone's best interests in hypnosis?
Well, it's really simple. If someone comes in and they want to lose weight for a specific purpose, I'm going to note the words they use. I want to look kick-ass tough or whatever it is. So then those words are going to be fed back to them in direct suggestion. And you're getting stronger, you're getting fitter, you're getting kick-ass tough. And that is going to work for them because those are the words that will tie into their best interest of what they want.
Yeah, that makes sense, Mike, because of course, if a client comes into our office or Zoom meeting or whatever it is, they probably know what they want. So they have an idea of what their best interests are. And we're going to use those words when we reinforce it with direct suggestion. So it makes perfect sense. So that's how the principles of influence are mapped across into hypnosis. And that explains why we like to say there's no such thing as hypnosis.
But everything is hypnosis. You know, years ago, Fidel Castro made a speech in the rain outdoors. I think he was covered. And a reporter reported later that he had stood and watched and listened to Castro for 4 hours in the rain and hadn't noticed the time pass. This is hypnosis too.
And since we're talking about dictators here,
and we are,
how are threats and coercion a part of the hypnotic experience, Mike, outside of the therapy room?
Well, in therapy, we don't want to use coercion. We don't want to use threats. But nefarious people for years have used fear, which causes the critical faculty to become more permeable. It's a way of bypassing the critical faculty and getting control of other people. But this is not a good thing.
So whether it's a government or whether it's a large organization or a group or whatever it is, we're talking about nefarious purposes here where fear is simply the emotion that they'll use to leverage to create a hypnotic
suggestibility
response.
and
Right.
hypnosis. Yes.
All right, so to wrap up, hypnosis is everywhere, and the principles map across very nicely to everyday influence. And we always say that hypnosis is a power so strong,
so great, it can only be used for good or evil.
So use it for good. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you click that subscribe button on YouTube, and then once you've done that, always ring the bell. You doing it behind your back?
Yeah.
I'm nicely done. That didn't work. Ring the bell so you'll always be notified. And while you're here, check out the description. We'll put a few links to other YouTube videos that are related to the content we just discussed here. Yes sets and compliance sets, heteroaction. There's a few other videos you're going to want to know about. And if you're interested in learning hypnosis formally from us, join the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy. We'll put a link to that in the description as well. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks again, and good night.